Hello.
Welcome in, everybody.
Hello. Hello.
How we all doing?
My collar's all messed up. Hello. We are tardy.
We are.
I blame Gabe.
We had some little technical difficulties, but we are powering through it.
We blame Gabe.
We playing Gabe.
Both of us are blaming Gabe.
We playing game.
Hello.
General Ginkgo, Paint and Liquor. Welcome in, everybody. Kenneth the Red, Cannibal, Law Dog.
What's going on, everybody? How's the week going? What is today? Today Thursday?
Today is Thursday.
Holy mackerel.
Oh, and look at that source.
It can't be that late in the week, can it?
It can't
I feel
be.
like it is.
Source with a year sub.
What?
Or the resub for 12 months. Thank you so much.
We've been putting up with you for a year?
Yeah.
No way.
The big new day, everybody.
Big new day. We got a new miniature.
We do.
We have a new miniature.
That's right. Painting vehicles. Tell us a little about this, Jason.
This is a tank.
It's kind of a tank. It's a tank thing.
It's a tank. It's a tank with a gun.
It's a tank with a gun.
It's a 17-pounder, which is a little weird because that would normally need this gun would normally need the Firefly back end on the turret, which it kind of has when you look at it. So maybe that's okay.
Interesting.
But it wouldn't have that much gun elevation.
Malice, first time watcher. I got the mega set recently, and I've been loving the paints. Nice. Living the paints. I'm sure it's living and loving.
Living and loving the dream.
Oh, walkie tank. That's right. Hello, everybody. Welcome in.
Welcome to Thursday.
Welcome to Thursday.
Wherein we've had a lot of people asking about airbrushing. We always have a lot of people wanting to see new cool things. So we're painting a tank that has legs. If you can call those legs, it has legs because it has big feet, right? Whole nine. It is airbrushed, primered in black brown. This is a Dust 1947, something like that. Dust Tactics model. Dust. I think it's Dust 1947. Dust Tactics. I don't remember it. Dust Tactics is what this one is labeled as. Paulo Parente's old game. That you can still buy the models for it. The game doesn't. I mean, the game exists, and there's still people that play it, and there's Facebook groups and things like that. So it still has a community around it. It is no longer in publication. Doesn't mean it'll never come up, but it's an amazing Weird War game. So it takes all your favorite World War II things and then throws in stuff like gorillas and zombies.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm kind of already.
The Germans have the Blitzkreuz.
You said gorillas and zombies,
and they're gorillas.
Which are like
they have the Blitzkreuz troops for Germany that are like big gorillas with like heavy cannons and autocannons that they carry around. It's crazy.
Dope.
It's crazy.
This game sounds great.
And then lots of crazy walking tanks and big, bombastic weapons of war. Along with standard like troops and stuff, but like heavy armored troops and things like this. And so this is a take on, the body is strange because these walker tanks all have the same, like, what is it? The M3A1,
the gun thing,
the little tank, Stuart.
Oh, okay.
It's like the Stuart body with a Sherman, M4. Turret on it.
Nice.
And then legs. So we're going to do some airbrushing.
This is a dope model.
We're going to do some airbrushing. I've glued all of this in place, so none of it moves. But they come pre-built, which is the coolest thing about this entire game, is you don't have to put really anything together. It comes pre-built. They're packaged, and they actually come pre-primed. This green is a primer base on the model. That is really cool. So they came like ready to paint, and they were really adamant about trying to make the hobby easy. Unfortunately, the game didn't take off as everyone would have liked. Paulo Parente is a fantastic artist. He's done art for GW. He's currently working, I think, exclusively in the gaming world with Cool Mini or Not on some stuff. So
cool.
Neat things.
That's awesome. That's super cool. It's a cool mini. Welcome
Says,
in,
Colonel
everybody.
says it was a crazy game and the minis were awesome. I love the Japanese forces. It had female ninjas. Yep. You had Dr. Frankenstein for the Germans.
Right.
Who was like a big... He had Frankenstein. I mean, I think it was a whole thing, right? He was just like intelligent Hulk kind of guy.
Yeah.
And all sorts of crazy characters from that end of the world. You had... what's the Russian... Rasputin. He had like Rasputin and things like that. So crazy, neat, alternate history, weirdness, sci-fi, fantasy kind of cool stuff going on.
That's awesome.
And big tanks and flyers and you name it. They had all sorts of crazy stuff. So, all right. So we are going to do standard camo green. We're going to do a faded, worn out green. Then we're going to weather it. So much like our Battletech miniature that we did not too long back.
Right.
We're going to spend a lot of time showing you how to do various techniques on vehicles that will help you get more depth and interest to them rather than just a box that you paint a color and then dry brush.
Nice.
So I'm going to be doing wonderful things like dark camo green, because why wouldn't you use dark camo green if you're doing a tank? And then if you're going to use dark camo green, you should probably use some camo green, because that feels like a natural progression. And then after you use some camo green and some dark camo green, maybe use some faded green mixed with the camo green to give it that worn out, been in the sun, oxidized green look. And that's just what we're going to do.
I love it.
So let's get started.
Let's do it.
We'll talk about the airbrush and how to airbrush, how I airbrush, all that kind of crazy stuff. So we have an airbrush. Ta-da!
Nice.
This is one of our models that we make with Grex. And we're going to start off with some dark camo green. And when airbrushing vehicles, the key is to start... Okay, there's two ways to do this. The key is to wind up with darkness in all of the in-between panel lines, okay? You'll see this if you watch like military scale modeling channels and things like this, that a lot of times with airplanes, they'll take it and paint it like a silver fuselage for the airplane. Then they'll go back with an airbrush and they'll go with black, and they'll do all of the panel lines in between all the riveted aluminum panels on the fuselage. They'll do black. And you can do it very messy, because what you're trying to do is recreate the idea that dirt and grime hides itself in between the metal panels and the grooves and low spots. We're going to do the same thing with a tank. I prefer to start dark and then work my bright colors up, focused with the airbrush in between the panel lines. So I will highlight to the middle and top area of panels and such, and then we'll go back and show you.
Nice.
How it looks, and then we weather, then we do all sorts of stuff, and it's fun.
Welcome in, everybody. If you're just tuning in, we are starting to paint up this vehicle today.
So for base coats, we're just going to take dark camo green and put it in the airbrush, because that's what you do.
Super cool color.
That's what you do.
Oh, it's such a great color.
We're just going to put it in the airbrush.
So how many drops do you do of that typically, Jason, when you airbrush?
That was that was 15.
15?
It all depends on how much you're trying to paint. Can we zoom in a little bit?
Yeah. Said Chris to Jason.
There you go. Perfect. So I'm just going to start base coating, but I want to try to start my color and stay away from the panel lines a little bit. So when I get to an edge where there's an edge of a panel, I just want to spray towards the middle of it. So I'm leaving this stripe unpainted. I'm not going to go over the stripe. Then I'm going to skip the stripe, come to this front little triangle on here. Boom. Do this little area. Do this little area. Blah, 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 blah. Now, you could just spray the model camo green, the dark camo green, and then go back with a black, brown, or a black, right? And spray those lines again. I find this is a lot quicker. You don't have to be great at aiming here. You'll just kind of get some color on the panel and then work towards the edges.
Dusty Hobby used it for the first time today, that dark camo green. It's a great color.
It is a fantastic color.
Kenneth the Red's asking, what needle size are you using?
0.3.
So you're using a 0.3 needle?
Yep. 0.3 needle size.
Mo, welcome in.
using this kind of panel highlighting mentality, you don't have to be great. You know, your coverage can be a little bit sloppy. You can miss areas because you're trying to recreate the ultimate feel of a weathered surface.
Yeah.
You know, and paint doesn't weather consistently. It will be faded in certain spots. It'll be, you know, more its true color where people don't walk on it in the case of tanks. You know, but you can imagine like engineers climbing all over the tank, you know, working on it from time to time. And so you'll have areas that'll have like, you know, foot trudging marks and things like that. So we just want to get all the panels with some coloring on them. Since I'm not thinning this color, it gives me quite a bit of intensity without having to do multiple coats. Kind of just gently pulling on the trigger until I see color down, and then I'll kind of hammer down on the trigger as I see the colors hitting where I want. That's one of the fundamental keys when learning to airbrush and you're getting your aiming right, is you'll get to a point where you can just get a little bit of color on there, and then as you see the color hit where you want, pull the trigger back a little bit further so you can get more paint laid down.
Welcome in, everybody. As you're coming in, I see more people coming in. We're starting up a vehicle today.
You can already see how it's darker in the panel lines, right? We're letting that black-brown base coat, in this case, be a color that we will use, you will see on the end product. That black-brown will show through as our dirty kind of shading color in between all these panels. You could do black, but in this case, you know, dirt that we're trying to do, like earth dirt, the black-brown makes more sense. So we'll go with that.
Paint Licker's asking, any tips when using the Grex airbrush? Just got one from the store last week.
Any what?
Any tips? Just general tips, I would say. I think that's what you're asking, Paint Licker.
Yeah, I mean, it like any other airbrush, you know, you just want to make sure that you're cleaning between cup fillings.
Yep.
So you'll see me run out of paint, and we'll squirt some water through, and I'll talk you through all that as we go. And just take care of it, right? Make sure you keep it clean. Don't leave paint in it after you're done. All the standard airbrush stuff.
What PSI
There's nothing
do you
special
use?
about it. Huh?
What PSI do you use?
I am spraying at about 22 PSI right now. I don't alter my PSI hardly ever. Some people will change their PSI based on what they're doing. If they're doing finer detail work, maybe they'll lower it. A lot of that will change throughout the course of you learning airbrushing as you get more comfortable with working close to the model. You can see that as I'm spraying, I'm about 2 to 3 inches away tops, and sometimes in like, you know, more like 1 inch away. I prefer to spray close to the model. Again, on an open panel that doesn't have panel lines like this, I still try to stay away from the edges. I'm focusing most of my paint into the center there and letting it feather out towards the edges. Same thing on this one, right? I'll see if I can exaggerate it for you. I'll paint like a circular motion in the middle of the panel like that, so it's dark out towards the edges, and then I'll just kind of feather it out towards the corners there.
Let's see. I'm going to go back up here. What happened to Tony the Tiger Woods? We wrapped him up yesterday. In yesterday's VOD, you can check that out. We did some extra little adornments and such on him. And we got that all done.
I'll pull him out and show you in just a bit. On things like this, I'll just kind of do the door, kind of try to hit the lamp there, section off these little body parts into little triangles and circles for the hatches and stuff. Again, so I'm staying away from panel lines and things that separate parts of the tank.
Yeah.
Anywhere dirt can accumulate and edges can rub, right? So like on this sidebar, let's just paint a line here so you can see. See that line I've done?
Yep.
And then I'll just spread that line towards the edges briefly without actually painting the edges if I can avoid it. And like I said, you're not really worried about perfection here. The lack of perfection almost creates a much more dramatic look and finish point for us. The key takeaway is that you don't want to just spray the whole model. Because see how you can already see how those verticals are darker? Because I'm not aiming the airbrush at them. And so I'm already getting a weathered finish. One of the cool things about painting this way is by the time I put the second color down, you could be finished. You could just dry brush it. Now we'll go a little bit deeper down so we can show you more techniques, but
How do you choose your mid-tone and highlight colors, Jason? All my colors keep ending up being almost the same shade when I finish.
with airbrush or brush?
Yeah, Paladin, let us know if you're talking about airbrush or regular. Well, Sophia's, welcome.
You probably want to just take bigger steps in value as you go. Right? There's a fear sometimes in going from a dark color to a bright color, right? We talk about that with like non-metallic metals. People are really afraid to take that jump that really creates the shine on the non-metallic metal. Same thing with any of your colors. They will start to run together if you don't get to a different enough color. It's that simple. The dark brown acts as such a good shadow, I don't really have to paint a whole lot of the undercarriage.
Yeah.
I can just kind of feather the green up into the other undercarriage, and it's fine. See, I treat this little section of the body, this little rhomboid or whatever, different than this top part. So I'll paint the top part, then paint that section, then come over here and paint this little section too, leaving that edge that's created there dark.
Nice.
Right? So it feels like a little bit of a pre-weathering. Almost if I had a dry brush black-brown on the model, think of it like that. Except the dry brush wouldn't get darkness down into the panel lines, which is why you can't really do it that way.
Isophist, thank you so much for that resub. 24 months. You've been around for a while.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
That's a long time. What happened to the Lion model? We finished that the other day. He's got a couple things he's going to finish off of it, but we decided to switch it up and start a new project.
We were sitting around talking about what would be next, and I was like, how about a vehicle, Chris? And Chris was like, a vehicle would be great. And then we started talking about what vehicle it would be, and I was like, you know what would be really cool is I still have some of those Dust Tactics models laying around.
Yeah.
If we can find it, I'd like to do the Sherman tank one.
This is great.
We found it. Hard to get in here, so I apologize if the camera doesn't see me too well painting the inside stuff.
We definitely can see the overall from the direction, which is cool. Kind of gives you an idea of what you're spraying and what you're not with the shadow and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you intentionally leave some areas darker?
Yeah, like down here, I won't put as much green because the dark brown is such a great shadow color for this model that it just kind of bakes that in for me already.
Yeah.
So I'll just feather some color along the undercarriage and don't really care if it turns completely green. You know, that's part of the weathering. So it kind of acts as a cheat for you.
Yeah.
I do want to make sure that every surface has got some green on it where it's intended, because you don't want to forget something and leave it just pure brown if you can avoid it. That'll look kind of funky.
Oh.
Right, so again, I'll treat this back section as a rectangle here on the back, even though it is rounded up to the top. But we'll just paint the rectangle of the back part here, staying away from the edges. Boom.
Nice.
And then we'll get the sides individually.
Yep. It's a cool model.
Right. We'll take that and blend it off into the side of the turret because there's nothing. We have a gas can on the other side. This side doesn't have that. Okay, so we get that kind of dark edge right there.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way the worn metal would start to look. So that works really well for us. Then we'll try to get the top and have it be separate.
Zazin's asking, are you planning on more military type colors?
Yes. Yeah, this is just going to be this US OD green, kind of using our camo green color that you see me making right now.
Our dark camo green is great.
Yeah, this is dark camo green right now.
It's super cool.
Some places you'll be finding yourself painting with more spots. You know, like a spot on this, a spot on that. So I can do like this side of the turret mantlet. Right? I'm just going to paint a spot there, and then I'll go over the top and the bottom. Again, that spottiness is what we're looking for. It gives it that dirty, worn look without us having to do anything else. And on the gun, I'll just run the length of the gun from the top, staying away from where it connects in there.
The Punisher's asking, what type of camo pattern are you going to use, though?
None. I'll do some white stripes on it or something for markings, but
classic.
I won't do any camo. I thought about it. I told Chris it'd be great to do some camo.
Yeah.
The problem is that this tank has, a lot of little things since you introduced the legs. It doesn't have like a long body for the tank treads and all of that. So camo wouldn't really fit well on it. We have done another one of these in the past. And I did do camo on it. It was a M3A1 Stuart version of this, like a amphibious Stuart version of this with an assault cannon on its nose.
Super duper John.
Maybe during this we'll go grab it out of the case and be able to show you how you can do that.
The big ones, right?
No, not the big ones. The one that's painted in the desert camo.
Oh, yes, right.
It's painted like the British Desert Rats.
Mm-hmm.
It actually has the Desert Rats logo painted on it and stuff like that. So
this is a good question. Super duper John, how do you still have paint in your pot? I feel like I would have to refill it 4 times at least by now.
Huh.
You brought this up the other day about like how much paint you actually need to put in your airbrush. Can you explain a little bit that, Jason?
Yeah, so for me, I mean, this is unthinned dark camo green, and you can see how I only put the paint up to right where it comes into the cup. You can see, right? It hasn't ever moved anywhere else from there. That's because as it dries, that skinning that happens up there at the top of the cup can start to fall down into the cup, clog your airbrush and such. So we'll get a lot of problems happening if we overfill, because you'll continue to suck that paint down in there. But I am able to paint quite a while with this, even in Arizona where it's super dry, as you're seeing. Unthinned, no flow improver, nothing. We just put the paint right in there. Pro-Acryl's great for doing that.
Yeah.
So, but depending on where you're at, the humidity level in the area where you live and things of that nature, you might quite well find that you've got to change out more often. Usually it's going to be because you run out, right?
Right.
We're not running out because we're really not putting a lot of paint down. This is one coat of paint.
It's not much paint.
At a fairly low, what would I call it? Low amount of paint coming out, right? Because I'm not really hammering down and pulling back the trigger much. I'm just kind of frosting green over the brown. And this is the trick of painting vehicles in this particular style, is it starting with that base layer. And if you prime your models black, that's fine. I do most of the time. So if you'd have primed this model black and then coated it entirely with black brown, that would work as well. To give that black brown coat would be fine. And then do the green. So we're using black brown as a primer layer, so that just makes it so much more easy for me to get started with the green. But then I'm just barely covering the brown. The dark camo green over the brown is the color you're seeing. It's not just dark camo green, right? I could just hammer down and get just dark camo green on here, but you see how much better that looks? Look how that's already like a weathered tank.
Yeah, I'm kind of now seeing what you're talking about. It's now that you've stopped, I can see the little not splotches, but the areas that are
the uneven application, we'll call it, right? That we have darkness where the edges are. There's a good look at it.
Yeah.
right? That's not a play on your eyes. There's that darkness right there along the curvature of the hull of the turret, right?
Yeah.
And the panel lines and all those places that you see it, which makes it look very weathered. And the airbrush is the best way to do it. You couldn't do that with the brush necessarily because the airbrush feathers that color towards the edges because of the way it atomizes paint into little dots.
Yeah.
So it looks like the difference between a Photoshop painting and a real painting. The Photoshop painting is all digitized and has little dithering in it and dots. That's what this is doing. Those dots are making it look weathered, like the paint is eroding away where it reaches out to the edges if you don't paint the whole thing. If you just cover the whole model, it's just going to be your color. Because we haven't, now you have those little out of focus looking spots, right? It looks kind of blotchy, it looks uneven, and that is I feel like that's a real comfortable way to learn to airbrush because it doesn't require you to be a master at placement of color. The unevenness is what you want, right? And so that random, it's not really random. I'm trying to stay away from edges, right? More color in the middle that will become apparent when we start putting the next color on, because the next color as camo green will start to highlight and we'll move that towards the center of these areas. And then the last color that we use will be the faded green mixed with the camo green, and we'll do that as an actual highlight, and we'll go towards the tops of all these panels. And then we'll go back and dry brush it with just the faded green by itself. And I think you guys will be blown away in how fast you can make a vehicle look absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Right? And you'll see that this isn't something that you have to be a pro airbrusher to do. Now, the big thing is being able to control the amount of paint that's coming out of the brush. And so if I get paper towel,
Yeah.
right? And you know, I can press all the way down, get air, and then as I pull, right, I start to get paint, right? So you can jam it and get tons of paint, or you can learn where that paint, no paint line is, right? And you get to where you're right there, and then it's off and on and off and on, and you can get a lot less.
Right.
Because I'm wanting to feather this, I'm kind of doing an in-between, right? I don't want to be able to pull fine lines. I want it to be that kind of misting. But see how, as I'm painting, see how you're still seeing the color even on the napkin?
Yeah.
Right? So it's almost like glazing, but I haven't thinned my paint at all. That's how I'm painting the surface, is being able to control just how much paint. See, if I just barely pull back, I get that feathering of paint, and that dusting of paint through there is very important to learn how to do because it gives you that effect of glazing, but also of, you know, like a rough texture that we want on the top surface of the tank, right? Pull that into focus for us. I could just go, you know, and pull back, and I can just go opaque, and I cover everything, and nothing shows through it. I want to do what I call feathering with an airbrush, which is where you just pull it back, and the atomization of the paint makes it less opaque because it's turning it into a lot of dots, and those dots are separating before they hit the model because you're spraying in a cone of paint. Right? When you pull it all the way back, more paint is hitting every area.
Yeah.
And so you get opacity. You pull back less and you get that feathering, that light kind of dusting ability. So if you were painting with an airbrush and doing like t-shirts or something, you can see how you do a tight line and then you might pull back and feather that line to shade it. Right?
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah.
So feathering is a huge practical way to learn to airbrush. So again, let me show you, right? If I do, you know, you do the eyeball thing, right? Right? And then you pull back and you feather and you shadow the eyeball by using that lighter pressure.
Yep.
Right?
Uh-huh.
And you get in tight and give it a bigger press to get a line that doesn't feather out so much. So distance to the subject, I'll pull back because I'm not going to get as much feathering up close because the cone of spray doesn't have as much distance to spread out. So the closer I am, the more tight format the paint is going to be. No matter how light I pull the trigger, it's not going to be as much of a, what I call that feathering or that dusting. I got to pull back out here, and then I can create all sorts of shading. Of course, now that I'm wanting to do that, I'm like almost out of paint. So
I was just about to say.
Right, but I can shadow under the eye, and then I get
Yeah.
in close, and I can do like a wrinkle or something, you know. I think I've got a bunch of dried paint on the tip of the brush. Oh, yeah.
Yep.
You see how, look how glommed up that is. Since we're not thinning our paint, it will start to give you tip dry. So just be aware that you'll need to come and clean off the tip, and then you're
Well, and you
ready to rock
mentioned
again.
you mentioned that tip the other day, like, hey, you know, after a certain amount, clean it out, take
Yeah.
it, put it back, clean
And that's
it
where we're
out,
at right now,
you know.
right? Because we've got our green all over the tank,
Yep.
right? All our surfaces are hit really well.
I'm gonna zoom out a little bit. Yep.
Right, so we've
Look
got
at that.
everything. that we need to get. And we've already got that pre-weathered look to it with just one color and a base coat, right?
That's great.
Like you could, if you were doing fast painting, like you're doing your new Deathcore of Krieg or you're doing your Imperial Armor stuff, you could do something like this and then dry brush this and literally be done. Paint the details out and you would love your model. Because you've already done the weathering that looks so hard to do when you look at 35th scale military models and the dioramas that people do. You've already done it. I've just shown you the secret of how their models look so amazing, and they're just cheating. They're doing exactly what I'm showing you. They're baking in those panel lights, right? Because otherwise you'd have to what? Oil wash that and then feather the oil wash out onto the surfaces around it? No, that's too much time. Right? We just did it. We'll go more in depth and show you a lot of advanced techniques that do things like oxidized paint and grime streaks and things like that. We're going to do all that on this model, so don't you worry.
If you're all just now tuning in, welcome in. That was a great little bit there. That was great.
I'm probably blowing Chris's mind because he's like, oh,
yeah,
Jesus.
It's funny.
We're going to have way too much content on this one.
It's funny, chat, because I was just listening and then I'm reading chat, but then I'm like, oh, I'm learning something, and I'm looking back at chat. I hope you guys enjoyed that bit.
This is the Beast.
Oh my gosh! Oh, and then we got this,
the Cavern of the Beast, where the Beast lives. And right now we've run, because we've been talking, we've had a lot of time, and you'll see how that paint is now dried, sort of starting to skin and cure over right in there, right? Even though I didn't use much paint. But now I'm going to go ahead and rinse it out. We're done with this color, so we do this anyway. But even if I said I wanted to go back and use more of the camo green, the dark camo green, I would rinse it now before adding more paint. Because the more paint you add, the more you agitate the problem. I'll get this to where you can see it again. Even blowing a bunch of water through there, you can see how that green down in there is still dried. So now what I'll do is want to take a paper towel. Right? And before I ever pull the trigger, I put water in here, right, to clear out most of the paint. You'll still see that, you know, I with that dried paint in there, it'll never get to the point to where the water's clear until I get that out. But I'll spray water through here a couple times to get the wet paint out, right? Like that, 8 or 9 times it is. Right? I still had paint in there too. Yeah. Then I'll take a paper towel or a Q-tip. I don't like Q-tips because the hairs on the Q-tips tend to come out. They make the hobby ones that are very tightly woven, but a regular Q-tip is a little harder to use, so I just use a paper towel. Get your finger down in there, right? Wipe that out. See? You get that dried paint out of there, and it gets that ring of paint loosened up again. Yeah. You can zoom back in.
Yeah. I wanted to show them that thing too. There we go.
Right? And then we keep rinsing out. Right? You're never using any soap. You're not having to scrub anything. You're just wanting to make sure that no dried paint, or as little dried paint as humanly possible, stays in the cup. So even that second wipe of my finger got a lot of dark paint out. Yep. Now we're looking cleaner. Now we spray this. Make sure you grab any of the little grimy bits that are showing up in there.
Here's a question.
Now my water's getting cleaner now that I got that out of there.
Actually, you know, this is good.
And so once you get to the point where you're filling up the cup and you can see through to the bottom of it, you know you're on your way. Since I'm going to stay in the range of green, I don't even need to get this really clean, right? I'll put a little bit of water in it that I can spray through. I'm comfortable now that I got all the dried paint out so that I can sit here and hammer down, just pull the trigger back all the way. Oh, you know what we didn't do? We didn't clean the needle off. There you go. You look at how dirty my needle got through all of that. You can see just the amount of paint that came off of there.
Yeah.
All that
quick wipe.
All that tip dry. So load that back in. Right, now we should get better spraying. We've still got paint in the nozzle that we got to deal with. If that has been left to dry too long, then that's going to cause us a little bit of a problem. Luckily, I just cleaned all of this before the stream, so it shouldn't take us too long.
L. Beaton's asking, can you just pour directly from the bottle into the airbrush?
That's what I just did.
When should you use thinner?
We'll start using thinner with this next color. Thinner is basically something that I recommend using to, if you need to lower the opacity of the color you're painting with, for sure, right? That's a no-brainer. But also for anything when you're layering, or if you have a paint that you just know is thicker, like you couldn't spray our heavy paints through here, the heavy titanium white or the heavy warm white. You wouldn't put those through this at all without thinning them way down. But for Pro Acryl, our paint line, you don't have to thin for base coats, really. Now, that tank, I probably sprayed a little bit longer with the base coat than I should have. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to back the needle out. I'm just going to pull it back far enough to where it's not sticking out the front so that I can take the needle guard off. Right? Because this thing, I know the super zoom's not working, unfortunately.
Let me see. I can zoom in a touch more.
There you go. Tight you can get in.
All right. That's pretty good.
Right. So I wiped it off, but you can get paint on this front end of the needle guard. This needle guard is it's the most important part. Well, there's a lot of important parts. This is a super important part of your airbrush. This collector or needle guard or whatever people are going to call it is where the air and the paint get mixed together, basically, right? Because the air comes out around the nozzle, right? The air and the paint are not in the same raceway, right? So the paint goes in the cup, down through a hole in the brush, out through the nozzle. The air, you won't be able to see it here, I don't think. Oh, yeah, maybe.
There it is.
If you got good eyes, see that hole up there?
Bring it down just a touch. There it is, yeah.
See that hole right there, up above the nozzle?
Yeah.
And then there'll be one right there. There's like 4 or 5 around the circumference of the nozzle. You'll see those little dark spots.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah,
right? Those are all holes that the air comes up through the valve, around the chase where the paint is, comes out around the needle, and out around the needle, and out this guard. This guard is what allows the air pressure to stay in there. And as that air goes around the needle, it creates a vacuum that pulls the paint out as you draw the needle back. Okay? So what that tells us is that the nozzle's got to be clean because it's got to be able to let the hole open up around the needle. If the nozzle clogs up, right? If this nozzle clogs up, then the needle takes up all the space. You pull the needle back and there's paint around it. The fresh paint can't get out. So you got to keep your nozzle clean, right? As the needle goes backwards, right? As you actuate the brush, then paint goes out around the hole that's left from the needle going back because it has a taper to it. That paint makes a droplet at the end, and then the air rushes past and takes that droplet and spits it out on the model. That's how airbrushes work. So you got to make sure that the opening in this doesn't have paint blocking it. So I'll see if you can get it like that, where you can see my white paper towel through the opening. You want to make sure that stays circular. Paint can get dried up and make that elliptical. You can get a little bit of dried paint on that surface. You want to always clean it off. Right? And you want to make sure your needle is free and clear of paint buildup on the end, right? Or anywhere along the channel, like you can see. See, there's still more paint on this needle. I just go like this, paint. So you want to make sure you've got the body of the needle clean, and don't let there be any paint dried up anywhere on the taper, because new fresh paint can clog up behind it and start drying and cause the cycle to begin where more and more paint starts building up against ridges. That's why when your needle bends, it causes you so much problem, because paint builds up at the blockage that is caused by the bend in the needle.
Here's a good question from Camo. My airbrush needle is getting stuck sometimes when I pull back. I've cleaned it pretty thoroughly, but any suggestions on what that could be? I have a hardened steam bag infinity, if that makes a difference.
Most of the time it's that the slide, so you've got a slide back here. I've got my tailstock off of this. You can see there's a slide inside the body that goes around the needle, and then a chuck here at the end that grips the needle. And then as I pull the needle back, that whole slide moves. It's probably the slide sticking. That could be a problem with paint coming up through the valve, right? If you do this, if you, let me put my needle housing on, all right? So when you're cleaning, if you put water in, right, and you put pressure over the needle and let bubbles come back, a lot of painters say to do this to clear it out. You don't want to do this aggressively. You just want to barely pull back so there's not a lot of pressure going back there. If you pull back and it does tons of bubbles like that, it can also force water through the seal. And if that water has paint in it and it goes through the seal that's right here at the back of the needle guard, that goes back into the valve area and the slide. And if it dries up, it can make it to where the slide doesn't move smoothly. That can feel like it's catching and it feels like the needle's not moving. Typically, it's not the needle, it's the slide. Now, it can also be that paint is built up around this area right back here where the seal is, and you can clean that. You can take your nozzle and needle off, and you can use your cleaning tools, right? You can use the larger of the cleaning bristles, and you can put that in through the nozzle and push it all the way back to about there generally. And then you can kind of easily do this, and it'll clean out any dried paint that's in the little seal area back there. And that should help it not grab your needle. Because, yeah, it feels like there's a little hitch. You pull back, and it's just like a little thing, and then it goes past it. Harder makes great airbrushes, so I doubt that there's anything wrong unless you've, like, dropped it or something. There shouldn't be any burring or anything like that on the metal. With cheaper Chinese master-style airbrushes, you can have it to where the metal slide from the factory has a burr in it, and wasn't polished properly, or the chroming was off, and there's actually some physical thing that rubs against another part of the body of the brush when you pull the trigger back, and that can cause you all sorts of problems. You'd have to open the brush out. You can take the slide out, right? You can take, like on most airbrushes, they're not going to be exactly the same, but this thing right here, you can put pliers on that and unloosen that, unscrew it. There'll be a spring and all. You got to take the trigger out. Right? The trigger comes out when the needle comes out, right? We can just kind of quickly talk about the function of the airbrush and the pieces. So regardless of the airbrush you have, if it's a top trigger airbrush like this, if you take the needle out, you undo the chuck, loosen the chuck, take the needle out. Always do that before you're going to work on any of the major parts of the airbrush. You don't want to bend the needle, obviously. Tighten the chuck back up so you don't lose that part, right? Then you can take once the needle is out, you can take the trigger out because the trigger has a gap there that the needle goes through.
Yeah.
So once the needle's out, there's nothing to keep the trigger in, so you can take the trigger out, right? Then you've got your spring portion here that pushes a slide back, right? And that generally will come out as well. You usually have to pull the slide back a little bit, and then that'll come out, right? Now the slide will go all the way forward. It usually wouldn't do that, right? And the slide's there, right? And this slide with the spring and everything will come out when I loosen this. That whole tail portion will come out. You got to be careful because sometimes, depending on the brand, when you unscrew this, the spring can spring. It can be, and you'll never find it again. So just make sure that as you're getting to where it's almost done, grab it with everything you got and bring it out easily. Keep your fingers on it. Do it into a cup. Let it all the parts. But there's really just a spring and two pieces of metal, right, that are there. There's a piece of the metal that slides like that. And then there's the piece of the metal that contains the slide and the spring. So you really should only have 3 pieces, 4 if you include the chuck key here, or the chuck lock, right? So you can pull all that out, and you can clean all of that. I'm not going to grab the pliers and take it out right now, but you can even see how our slide, if you can see, it's kind of grimy.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to zoom in on that just a touch. Oh no, that's it. There it is.
Right, but see, it's kind of grimy. So I should take that out and clean it.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
The way the Grex is made, that doesn't rub against anything. It doesn't rub against the sides anywhere. Mm-hmm. So it being grimy doesn't affect this brush. Some of them, the slide rides inside the chase very tight, and it would, if it gets any grime on it, as you pull back, it rubs against the body of the brush. The Grex doesn't do that, so
nice.
Makes it easier to maintain.
Well, chat, cleaning your airbrush 101. That's all she wrote. That was nice. Jason, thank you.
You're very welcome. Glad I could help.
I'm if you all have questions, be sure to tag me. Here's a question from Camo again. How often are you replacing your seals? I just replaced my air cap seal, and that helped with another problem I was having.
So I'm a bad human being.
I was good. No, you're not. I'm a bad human being.
I'm a bad human being. I have not once in my entire life ever replaced an airbrush seal.
Really?
Never.
Really?
Never.
Well, but
ever.
you also, you take care of yours. They last a long time, I'm sure. You know, kind of like your brushes. They get used, but they're in good
I
condition.
clean
still.
them. I never have to worry about it. I've never had a seal go bad. I've used airbrushes for decades without ever changing a seal. It doesn't mean that some of the problems that make me replace the airbrush are not because I never changed the seal. So there's that. But yeah, I've never had to replace the seals in a single airbrush.
Oh.
The seals should literally last the lifetime of the brush if you clean it properly.
Chat, if you're just now tuning in, we've started painting up a vehicle and we just did some mid spray cleaning. That's what that's called, right? Mid spray cleaning.
I feel like that's a good way to put it. All right, so now the question was asked, when do I thin versus not thinning? Now I'm going to thin because now I want to make sure that my next color, number one, is not so vibrant, right? So with base coats, like the green we just did, right, we wanted it to stand out. It's going over that brown. We want it to be able to blend in with the brown, give us the weathering, feather at the edges. Fine. We want full intensity color. Great. As we go brighter, I don't want full intensity color because I don't want the spots that the airbrush makes just by it being an airbrush, and it atomizes the paint turns into dots, the dots hit the model. I don't want those dots to create a lot of contrast. You know how we talk about glazing? And if you glaze bright colors, they cause the most problem because they create the most contrast on the model and you see the problems. The problems exist with everything you're glazing. You just notice them when it's the bright colors. So as I start going up in my highlights, I start to thin so that the paint is more controllable in a standpoint of not being as vibrant as it hits the model. I might have to layer it a couple more times, but that's fine, right? Especially with the airbrush. So I'm going to grab a cup to mix my paint in. I do not recommend mixing your paint in the cup of the airbrush. Some people might put two colors in here and then get a brush and stir it up. I tend to avoid doing that. You know, you can if you want. I don't like to stick anything down in there and mix it up too much. All right, so the next color is camo green. And when I say mix, I'm just going to thin it. That's all we're doing. Again, I'm probably going to use, I don't know, however much that is.
What is that technical term? A doot?
That's a skosh.
That's what it a skosh.
That's a skosh. It's about a skosh. And I'm going to grab some glazed wash medium. Acts as a thinner and a flow improver. Keeps the nice matte finish of the paint as well. And I'll probably add about as much glazed wash as I had paint. 50-50, let's call that. Very scientific measuring methods we have here. And then to show you how scientific I am, I'm going to add exact amounts of water that look like that. That was exact. That was something I don't expect you to learn quickly. Then we use the butt end of a brush, and we mix it all up. If you use a butt end of the brush, you don't have to clean the brush. Look at me, wisdom from an old guy. I'm lazy. I ain't trying to clean stuff. I already have to clean the airbrush all the time. All right, and that should do it. Oops, sorry. Banged the microphone.
It's all good.
I had all my stuff sitting right in front of it.
Liz Mama Mia. That's my mom.
What?
Hey, how's the new chair, Masucci? Yes, Chris's mom's hip and has a channel. Hi, all you hobby nerds.
Chris's mom?
Chet, it's full circle.
Did Chris say that we were nice people or something?
Oh my goodness.
Is this Chris's Space Marine mother? You should hear the way he talks about you. I don't know that you're gonna. So when chat starts telling you amazing things, Liz, I need you to be aware that I have nothing to do with this. I love you like the sister I never had.
Oh my goodness.
I am so happy that you raised Chris the way you did.
I can't believe.
But the way he talks about you may have chat thinking differently.
No, not true.
I just need you to bear with us. Don't blame chat. They're actually fairly nice people. I'm lying. They're not really nice at all. We got this mixed up. We're just going to pour it in.
Nice.
I'm going to leave about half of it in there because I might want to mix that with a brighter color later.
And what's that workup one more time, Jason?
This is just camo green.
Nice. With a little bit of glaze and wash medium.
Use a little bit of glaze and wash. 50-50 with glaze and wash medium. and a spritz of water. All right. Off to the side, I'm testing. I'm basically taking the airbrush, and I'm always testing to make sure that I get a little bit of paint when I'm pulling, and that it's the kind of consistency that I'm looking for. So I do that off on the corner of my work paper here. All right, so let's just start with the turret up top. Right? So I'm going to get in about 2 inches away, and I'm just going to start doing what I did before. I'm going to start with the center of the panel and just kind of feather it towards the edges, staying up closer to the top. And I'm just going to do the same exact thing in all of these panels, repeating the process we did before, but now, not doing the whole panel, I'm wanting to create some highlights, so I'm working up towards the top end of the panels only. Nice thing when painting this thin is I can go in, like you see me now, I'm not painting, I'm using the air to dry it up so I can see how I like it real quick, and that's looking really good. So on these vertical stripes, it'll be easier to tell what I'm doing because I'll start up kind of high here on this one, and then I'll just feather down. Start up high on this one with a spot, and then just kind of feather down. Come back up to the top. Same thing over here. Feather down, back up to the top with more paint. Right.
Nice.
So you see the spots that I'm making, and then as I just use air now to dry it out, you'll see what that looks like. As we get the wetness goes away, and now you can start seeing that weathering, right? Now we're amplifying it. You're starting to see how the brighter colors will make it look like everything's dirtier down towards the bottom where gravity's pulling all the grit and grime. And you just continue doing this, all these little areas.
Spaznet, you need to have a GoPro mount. We need an Insta360 on the tip of that airbrush.
Oh my God. You know
Actually,
how many
that's a
people
great-
would get motion sick?
Yeah, you'd have to really like do a warp stabilizer on it. Although that would be kind of cool, it would make you sick. Because I've seen like that on like a golf club or something like
geez.
that, and it is.
Yeah, I'm not interested.
Every twitch of everything.
You couldn't have Jen anywhere near this room. She comes into my room when I have a ridiculously huge monitor set up. I have 3 34-inch monitors linked together on my computer at home.
Starship.
And it's like 7 foot wide. And when I'm playing games like where you turn your field of vision and it wraps around you, she walks into the room, and if she looks at the monitor, she immediately like gets nauseous.
Oh man.
All right, so you can see on that side versus that side.
Nice.
That's where we started. This is where we're heading. You can start picking up the darkness of the weathering. The weathering is a term I use loosely. It's just the first coat of paint showing through. We just keep going. Same thing on each of these panels. Just pick the panel out.
Question, Jason.
Yeah.
What about the flat sections, like the portions between the turret and the rest of the tank, Colonel? Great question.
Flat portions, like between the turret and the rest of the tank. What are we talking about?
Are you talking about
Like up on top here?
Yeah.
I mean, we'll get those.
Or how to approach them, Colonel? Is that what you're thinking or asking?
Everything is broken down into smaller shapes again, right?
Mm-hmm.
So same as we did initially, we just want to look at each little section as its own shape. So again, on this back part, we have this kind of whatever that is, right? And I want to kind of start up towards the top, get close, start up towards the top, and then feather down, right? And just do that triangular section there, right? Then I've got this, same thing, start up at the top. Basically do a line here. I'll show you what I'm doing, right? A line right across the top of that panel,
No, nice.
right?
Look at that line. Yeah, I can see that.
Right?
Uh-huh.
And then I feather that line, so now I pull the airbrush back a little bit. Now instead of
Colonel,
being
that
1
makes
inch away, I'm like 2-3 inches away, and I just kind of feather the trigger and work that color down towards the bottom, and now I feather that line out, and now we get a blend.
Colonel's saying, yeah, how to approach them, those areas.
But like these small ones, it's really just a quick pull back and kind of spotty, so you'll hear it like and then to kind of feather it in there, since they're hard to reach. And at some point in time, you don't care because you can't get any more color in there, so you're fine. Right?
Yeah.
Then I get in close again on this little panel line here, or this little panel here, and I'll, again, let me just use that kind of spritzy thing, and I'll just kind of make a bit of brightness up at the top of the triangle.
Yeah.
Then I'll pull back about 1 inch, and then I'll feather that down onto the panel.
Gotta love Jason's sound effects. Yes, they're great.
But now I have a weathered panel. Now the lines between those sections become even darker because now I have the not only the black brown but the dark camo green because I'm pulling the camo green in tighter to the middle, right? Because this panel here on the butt was painted with the dark camo green, and the only area I didn't hit with the green is the very edges. Now I'll come in here and I'll get, you know, about, I don't know, 1/2 inch away, and I'll do a line in the middle like that, right? And then I'll come back about 2 inches, and I'll just feather that line a little bit.
Colonel,
Notice how I'm wiggling the nozzle of the brush around, right? And boom, now, bang, blended.
Colonel says, that is exactly what I wanted to know. Nice, great.
Then I'll use some air to dry it so you get rid of that wet line in the middle, and boom, blended panel. So a lot of the trick with the airbrush is learning how to do that as you're aiming in, right? So again, let's just keep showing you. Same thing. This is just a rectangle on the back of the turret here. I mean, it's kind of slanted on the sides, right? But I just want to get in close, do a line of paint across where I want my highlight to be, bam, like that. Just a line, just a nasty line. You'd never leave it like that, right? And then pull back about 2 inches and start feathering that line.
Oh, magic. Come on, man. That's great.
Right, boom.
Chat, that's great.
Then I use a little bit of air for you guys so you can see as it dries up because the paint will be wet. Now, thinning your paint is very intensely necessary here because if I was not using thin paint, you might still see that line.
Okay,
right?
Gotcha.
But now it's all blended out and I get the darkness down towards the bottom because I put the line up towards the top where that'll be the color the most intense. And so that's building in that pre-baked weathering. Okay. Then same thing up top. I'll just kind of do the method. Because I've got all these little spots around the cupola here. Hinges. And don't worry about it. If you have like a dot of paint, that's fine, right? Because again, there's people that walk on the top of this to get in and out of the tank. So the paint is going to be all splotchy anyway from where it's worn and dirty.
Yeah, the scenario kind of lends itself to be a little bit more forgiving because you're right. It's a battle. Not a lot of tanks look unused.
No. So I mean, you can. I don't know how much you can tell that I'm just kind of splotching it in there. Hopefully the camera's picking that up, right? There's a lot of shadow from the gun, but I'm not doing anything. You can see where I'm missing paint right in here.
Oh yeah.
Who cares, right? Gives it that real splotchy look. Get these crane hooks.
Well, because you definitely can tell the difference between that and the undone side.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah, like you can see the color for sure.
Oh, 100%. Clean the tip of the needle off a little bit. Even with the thin paint, it will start to dry because we're taking our time and explaining as we go. Normally, I would have been done already. Right? So again, on this side, same thing. We just come in, do a line across the top. Right? And then from the bottom of that line, just feather it out. Go right over the line, but pull back, and then just kind of feather it out, staying away from the edges. Then no pulling back, just so I have air. Always good to use the air to dry your work when working thin so you can see what you've actually got. And booyah, side of the tank.
Nice.
I might get a little bit right here on this area of the underneath that pops back out into the light.
That's great.
And then you just see, this is just repeat as necessary, right? Another line across the top of this one. and then feather it out. And once you get comfortable, you'll be able to do that all in one step, right? So rather than doing the dot and the line, right, I can just kind of put the color here on the leg and then feather it out all at the same time. Oh, so yeah. I'll just spend more time up top to load more paint on there and then feather it down. Use the air to dry all that away to get rid of those spots.
Nice.
And bam.
Great.
Come back and load up a little bit more color over here if I need to. This is a super easy way to paint. It's a super easy way to get comfortable with the airbrush because, like I said, it's not requiring you to be perfect. Vehicles are fantastic for this because, again, you know, a tank like this is all the same dang color. I'm not even worried about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, what I'm doing here is like aiming up at the top of this panel, right? Loading in a bunch of color, waiting for it to look wet and shiny like that, and then just feathering it down. And that'll give me that blended look.
Spitfire, how do you spray so much without clogs?
Well, you've been noticing as I talk, or maybe you haven't, as I talk, I'll go over and like clean the tip.
Yeah.
A little bit.
And we also did a clean midstream too. Often cleaning it definitely will help.
Yeah,
that.
Clean between colors, and a clean, you know, rinse out between colors to make sure you don't have anything jamming up inside. Is always a must.
Traven, thank you so much for that Prime sub.
This is not my brightest color, so I'll feather it up on the inside underneath the hull there as well. And remember, this color we thinned with the glaze wash medium, right? And some water, so it's a much thinner paint, so it will be able to last a little bit longer without clogging. It'll still tip dry because of the way I'm feathering. The tip dry is not only caused by the paint and the mix of the paint, it's also caused by how you are painting. If you're using a lot more air without blasting a lot of paint through the gun, then you're going to get tip dry. Okay, so here's a square panel with no adjoining edges that's facing upwards. So here I'm just going to start in the middle, right, with a kind of a circular motion like that. I'll exaggerate it. And then I just kind of dry that with just air and then feather a little bit of color out on the panel. Dry it with air. And there I've got a nice little highlight on the inside of the panel.
Nice.
Right, it doesn't look like a circle of paint. You have to be careful as you're doing this, like I said, to thin the paint so it doesn't look like just a circle of color, because it will if you're not careful. Same thing over here. Kind of give me a circle of paint like that. And then pull back a little bit and feather the whole panel. By pulling back, the paint spreads out further before it hits the surface, which means it's going to look blended rather than as you get close in, you'll make an actual circle or dot of paint. And then here, same thing, kind of right in the middle. I'll just go in and make a circle of paint. Right. And then this one, I'll feather it up a little bit more towards the top than the bottom because this one is not facing our light source.
Nice. Yep.
You're starting to see the darker edges poke out. And then I'll just kind of speed along and fill in the gaps. There's some spots that I can go quick with. Lower glazes on the tank. A lot of this is just spotting the paint around. So this is back to because it's not big enough areas to really blend. So you're just kind of spotting and then pulling back and spotting again. So getting close, spot that hatch, and then pull back and hit it again with a couple.
D-Fresh, do the satin and gloss paints you have retain their finish through the airbrush? Can the glaze and wash medium help remove that?
The glaze and wash medium will help matte them down a little bit. You'll have a hard time getting rid of the full satin or gloss of the paints without a gloss varnish over the top. Right? So mixing something in to make them matte is not very easy. It's easy to take a matte paint and turn it gloss or satin. It's harder to take a gloss paint and turn it matte. So what you generally want to do is paint with it and then put a matte varnish over the top. That will matte it out completely. Okay.
Jade, great. Now I just want to go play with my airbrush and paint something silly responsibilities. Yes, it does make you want to pick up the airbrush and go. That's for sure. I'm chat. You'll have to forgive me because I'm also watching Jason now, and like just my mind is kind of, I don't know why. I don't know if you're having the same thing, chat, where I know now that I've heard it out loud, it makes sense. If it's kind of sometimes it seems a little easy or obvious, but now I'm like, oh, there's just a different way to approach it. So that's my TED Talk.
That's my TED Talk. Use the airbrush for the technology it provides, and that technology it provides is the atomization of paint. It turns paint into little dots. So how can you use that kind of out of focus look that it gives to your advantage? And on vehicles, it's to just get this built-in weathering effect, right? Because dirt and dust and all that is very out of focus. It's the best way to say it. You know, when something's super dusty, it's just gritty, you lose the detail on it. And so the airbrush is a built-in weathering device in that regard.
T. Schmid, don't know about the rest of you, but I find the little psst, psst, airbrush noises to be extremely soothing ASMR. And now for some airbrushing. The subtle sounds of Jason Craze. That's funny. It really is. I maybe that's what's going on. I'm just being hypnotized by the sounds.
Yeah. Haven't done the barrel yet, so I need to do the barrel.
This one's got a lot of content, chat. I hope you're liking it. Reggie, snake jazz.
One thing you have to get good at when airbrushing, and this is going to sound kind of silly, is being able to judge when wetness is, you know, how wet an area is as you're spraying. Because a lot of the amount of paint you're putting on, you won't be able to see the color as well initially. You'll have to just judge by, oh yeah, I'm seeing shine on that spot where I put the paint, so I know I've done it. Does that make sense? Because I'm not being able to see a lot of my blend right now but I can see the shine of the wetness down the barrel to know that I got paint there. Mm-hmm. And I just trust the process that I've been able to blend that in. So now the top of the barrel is brighter. And I think we got everything. That's looking really good.
That's looking great.
Isn't it?
That's awesome. Chat.
It's almost like a weathered tank.
There
and we
is.
haven't done any weathering. That's the brilliance of this whole method. Every time I show it, people are blown away by the fact that they're like, well, now, wait a minute. What else do you have to do? Because it looks like you're done.
I mean, this is that kind of that same concept. Is like once you get this nice base layer and these techniques down, you're kind of done in your mind sometimes. But it's definitely looking great.
And the underside, we don't really have to worry about. We already got the green on there, the other dark camo green, and that looks pretty good. So I think we are ready to rock and roll with cleaning and doing the next color.
Nice. Jabe, sigh. I just jumped in, and I'm definitely going to have to watch the first hour when I get home. Gabe, yes, this one. I wish you were watching this one. I know you were in a meeting, but it definitely is it was a mind blower for sure. It makes these bigger projects seem a lot more approachable. Obviously, when you have the tool of an airbrush, it makes this whole thing more approachable, but definitely makes the airbrush technique a little less intimidating.
Oh yeah, like I said, you know, the airbrush is something that scares a ton of people because when you pick it up and use it, you're like, oh hell no, right? There's no way I can paint an eyeball and be as detailed as these people I see doing crazy airbrush t-shirts and artwork and blah blah blah. That's not the point of the airbrush, unless that's what you decide you want to do.
Right.
The airbrush is not have to be just that, right? The airbrush, I'm showing you how I'm just spritzing paint in rando locations, right? And we have a pretty decent looking weathered tank.
Yeah, it's great. I love that dark camo green now. Now I just want to do this all over everything.
Yeah, it's funny. I always have people going, I wish you guys had like a really good green drab color. And I'm like, have you tried our camo greens? Because our camo greens kind of rock.
They're amazing.
They kind of rock. They do Russian, American, Japanese, Army green like really, really well.
That's great.
Cool. Okay, so I'm going to put that aside. We're going to clean now.
You gonna change up colors after this?
Yeah, we're going to use the same color mixed with faded green. Faded green on its own is a little too bright through the airbrush to do. It would make it look a little cartoony with its brightness.
Okay.
So we're going to mix it with the camo green to get the next color brighter, about 50-50. I'll show you that. And then we're going to spray that as a highlight color, right? And it will do the panels the same way, but it'll be a lot less paint that we use. This will just be used to start being the highlights. Then we're going to dry brush that faded green on the whole model. Then we can start doing our edges off the paintbrush, and then we start getting into weathering. But you'll see that with the next color paint and then the dry brush, this tank will look done. Like you'll be like, all right, finished, dude. Like, you could just put that on the table, put some basing material on it, paint the gun and the gas can, whatever color they need to be, put decals on it if you want. And technically you could do that right now. Like you could take this model as it sits right now, dry brush it, right? And pretty much be done. I'm going to go with more color because we want to show you more.
Okay.
Again, we're never putting a whole lot of paint in the airbrush. A little bit of paint goes a long way once you learn how to control the trigger and not just go ham and pull the trigger back all the time, right? It's not a spray can, you know?
I'm going to do this real quick. I need to calibrate the zoom. Hold jet. Pause for dramatic effect.
Pause for dramatic effect.
And you'll see it do its magical thing, chat.
We've been talking so much that I have to grab a Q-tip. So I have, one thing you'll notice, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but there is paint dried in the neck. So I've got to get the Q-tip out because it's the only thing I trust putting down in there to grab that dried paint out of the neck. This will cause you all sorts of headaches if you don't get that out of there.
My mom says my nail tech uses an airbrush to paint just the tips of my nails.
Yeah.
I was shocked at the ability zone to such a small spot. Kind of amazing, actually.
It's such a great blending tool, right? So if they're doing like blended colors, or if they're just wanting to make sure that they, don't have to paint all the way up to the cuticle, I've seen people do it because they can just mask off the fingernail either with Vaseline or with plastic. They have those little plastic covers they put over your fingers. Yeah, it works like a champ. Tons of people I know have talked to me about, painting fingernails and all sorts of stuff. And so now I've got all the solids out of there. Now we just run the paint through with water. And because we're going to be continuing to use green, we don't have to do a whole lot here, right? It doesn't matter if there's still a little bit of green coming out because we're going to put more green in. Even in times where I'm switching to another color, like let's say I was going to switch to purple and do shadows with this, I might leave a little bit of the green in there just so they turn into that kind of muddy blended color. Then when I spray it, that helps a little bit more too. All right.
Thank you for your patience. The chat needed to recalibrate our lens.
Keita asking, yeah, this is a tank from Dust 1940, or Dust Tactics, I think it's called.
Dust Tactics 1947.
Yeah, it is a Weird War II game, the alternate history. It's kind of a Stuart, right? M3 Stuart chassis with a Sherman, M4 Sherman turret and a Firefly 17-pounder gun. It's an amalgam of nonsense with legs.
It's cool, though.
Yeah, it's a great tank. So all of the Dust stuff was great because it really did. It put it like, the perfect blend of like historic, if you like historic tanks and things like that, it's great. But then it puts a sci-fi fantasy flip to it too. So I always love that. I think it's great. Okay, so now we're going to mix another color. Set the airbrush aside for a second. We can grab our cup that has our camel green in it. I'm going to now put some faded green in there. Now, this is one of those where I'm not able to show you 50-50 because I don't know how much camo green that is. So I'm just going to put a few drops in here. There's 3 drops of faded green in with whatever's left of our camo green. Then we're going to re-up our glaze wash medium. Right? Since we already have glaze wash medium in there, we added 3 drops of faded green. So we'll add 1, 2, 3 drop. I'm going to do 4 just for good measure. 4 drops of the glaze wash medium, but you're trying to not do 50-50 of the mixture volume. You want to do 50-50 of what you just added in, because we already have the glaze wash medium plus the camo green in this that we just sprayed. So now I'm putting 3 drops of faded green, put 3 drops of glaze wash medium, and now that's the same mix. And then the highly technical part, which is a spritz.
A skosh.
This is a spritz. You need to get your measurements straight, buddy. This is a spritz.
This is definitely a spritz.
That was a spritz of water. See what I have to deal with, chat? Jeez.
Oh, there it is. There it is.
See what I have to deal with, chat? All right, and that gives me a fantastic color, and you can see how you can tell really quickly how much lighter that will be on the tank and give us our highlight. But had I gone with just faded green, I'd be in a world of hurt. I would be very cry. Much cry, not happy. That's going to be a good color. So we get our brush. Brush. Airbrush. Okay, just pour it right in there. I'm going to leave a little behind in case I do want to lighten it up a bit. I don't need a ton of this. Boom. Like I said, don't ever really fill your airbrush any more than that. Just where the hole comes up into the cup, where it comes up into the flare of the cup. That's the most you should ever add to your airbrush.
Gabe was just asking, sorry if you've asked this earlier, but why did you mix in a cup first instead of mixing in the bowl itself?
I've grown out of mixing in the bowl over the years because I have actually bent my airbrush needle.
Oh,
the needle is not supported in the area underneath the cup. And so if you start jamming a mixing tool down in there, you can distort the airbrush needle to the point where it has a kink in it, and ever so slight of a kink as you pull it back causes all sorts of problems because it puts tension on the needle going through the nozzle in a weird way that the needles at the nozzle end starts rubbing at the opposite point of the bend. So if you push and it bends the needle down just even a hair, it means it makes the nozzle, the tip of the needle, go up just a hair. And as you pull it back and forth, it doesn't pull back evenly. So I just am scared. So I don't do it anymore.
No, that makes total sense. I did not even think of that. I'm going to zoom in a little.
So now I'm going to be doing the thing a whole bunch more. Because I really want this to be a more uneven highlight. So I'm do a couple of that, then kind of pull back.
Nice.
See? And it gives you that kind of oxidized metal look. So this is not a continual spray. This is literally just kind of, hopefully you can see my finger. Watch my finger as it just kind of bounces on the trigger a little bit. And I place those highlights. Right? Then I'll come back a little bit back here and just feather that out. So now I'm 5 or 6 inches back. So now the paint that I'm hitting won't ever look like I sprayed it directly. It just blends all those colors together. Now I have that entire line of greens, and look at that fade. Right?
Yeah.
So just work in close. You got to get used to being that inch away from the model and just kind of tapping on the button to get the color where you want it.
Demetrius, thank you so much for 90 months.
Wow.
Wow.
Insane. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Good advice on mixing in the cup. I did that once, and now my airbrush has a thing for feet.
Has what?
Has a thing for feet.
A thing for feet.
Do you think this approach would also work well on BattleTech Mini, says Papa Chicken? Or are they too small?
It's very difficult to panel highlight BattleTech Minis because they are tiny.
So
if you had a 0.2 needle, you could try it. You'd go berserk. There's 80 million panels on those things. I would say sticking it at like 1/35th scale or this 1/56 that we paint in at the kind of Warhammer level is about the limit of my, patience for this kind of painting. Now, we could have done this on the larger Timberwolf model that we did.
Yeah.
This is great for painting Gundam. This is great for painting any kind of, scale model tank or airplane that you're going to do. Although the technique that I'm showing you here is really built for ground vehicles more than planes. There's a variation that you would use to get the paneling done on planes. Planes typically don't get the same ground grime on them. Unless you're doing a diorama of a plane stuck in the dirt, like crashed into the ground or something, right? So there you go.
Nice. Extrin's asking, so I know the thinning of paint airbrush has been gone over, but I just sprayed, so probably just now, burnt sienna through my airbrush and almost got clogged halfway through spraying. Should I thin the paint a little, or am I running the PSI too high? I'm also in a really dry, cold environment, if that has something to do with it.
Obviously, the drier your environment is, the quicker the paint is going to cure. So yeah, thinning it is fine. Thinning the paint for the airbrush is key when you start having clogs. I'm giving you kind of just entry level where to start. And then if you start having problems, definitely alter as needed. There is no bit of info that I'm giving you that is a must do. If you're in a real moist climate, you're going to probably not really thin your paint as much at all, right? Because you'll start getting your paint to the point where it won't really dry. So you got to be careful. Now, these flat panels, I got to be careful. I don't want it to look like a line. I'm not spraying as much paint, and I'm not able to blend as much. So again, it's just kind of quick pulses. Oh, I have tip dry. Okay, so here, this is a good one. If we can, I don't know if you can see this. I mean, very white. If you can zoom in as far as you can.
Yeah, I'm gonna do one more.
You can see that. See that on the end?
Yeah, right there. There
it's a hunk of paint. That causes it to not paint anymore. Get that off there. So because I'm pulsing, right? I'm doing short bursts of air. I'm not always shooting all of the paint that I'm pulling through the siphon effect that's happening. Not all of that is leaving the needle each time. When you pull the trigger back and you pull it back and use it like it's supposed to be used, that paint gets siphoned, runs along the length of the needle, and then as you release the trigger and the airflow stops, it pulls less and less paint, so it leaves the needle with a nice skinning or pulls most of the paint off of it. As you're bursting, you're pulling a drop of paint on the needle and then throwing some of it off, and some of it's pulling back. You can imagine how water drips. If you've ever seen water drip, it drips, and then a little bit of a droplet forms back on whatever it dripped off of. That's exactly what's happening as we're pulsing. That's why you saw that little ball of paint at the end of the needle, because every time I'm spraying, it's coming back and making a ball of paint. So you might exhibit faster tip dry. And I would always say, the first time you find that there's no paint coming off of the brush onto the model, don't just pull the trigger back harder, because then you'll get used to pulling the trigger back harder, and when you clean it, you'll hate yourself, because then you'll go and pull the trigger. Your finger will have that muscle memory of how it wants to pull the trigger, and then you'll get too much paint. Okay. So there I just kind of pulsed down the line. I didn't ever make a line. I just pulsed a bunch of spots. And it gives me that unevenness, but it also gives me my highlight. And then I can come back about 5 or 6 inches and just kind of feather that a little bit, and that'll blend that. So now it's a nice line. I get a little bit on the undercarriage here towards the back, but I don't want to brighten that area underneath too much.
Here's another message from my mom. Dang it, I'm not getting any work done here. I'm worked and I'm hooked on watching this. Truly not just saying it. I better sign off.
It's pretty cool, right?
Fire sushi. Well, thanks for tuning in, Mom.
Thank you so much. He's going to remember this day. The day his mom realized he was famous.
Mama Masucci. If you're all just tuning in, welcome. We started a new project today. We finished up El Tonio and Tigre.
That little triangle piece.
And now we're doing some airbrushing.
And here, because we have a shelf that will cause a shadow up at the top, see how this butt panel is inlaid? Our highlight is actually going to be towards the bottom more.
Mm.
So again, just kind of pulsing the paint onto the surface. And again, the reason for that is that if I draw my line and then try to feather my line, I will cover up all of the paint that happened before. So I don't want to do that. I just want to kind of feather the trigger. I'm already got tip dry again. Big old ball of paint on the needle. We didn't thank Mom for the desk.
Thank you for the desk. Gabe needs to thank you.
That's true. I guess it's Gabe that got all the benefit there, huh?
We got these nice cozy chairs too. I'm comfortable. I am realizing though I need to take the armrests off of these because there's like a slight bump and the whole apparatus just jiggles everything.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
A little bit of highlight on the heel down there. You get a little bit on these pistons.
I do have one of those large, what are they called? Like those special mechs from BattleTech, like the big 3-legged Poseidons that Philip and Gabe got me.
Super heavies.
I want to do this on that because those are like 3 times the size as a normal BattleTech model. So
that one you could probably pull it off with.
Yeah.
Right. So here's a good way to compare and contrast. Here's this side, which I can probably get a little bit more brightness up on this front. Right. So there's that side on the body, and then this side. Nice. It almost looks like we haven't painted this side now, right? That's the effect of the contrast that the highlight drags in there.
Dang. Give Jason the chair. He needs more comfort than you. Dang. Brutal.
I need more what?
She said, give Jason that chair. He needs more comfort than you.
I'm standing. But thank you. I do agree.
Brutal. What brand of airbrush are you using, Jason? Says Voldemort.
Ours. It's our airbrush that we use, our XG that we do in concert with Grex.
Zazin's asking, are you going to plan on glazing any color on the top?
I won't do as much glazing as I will be using Noosh to show you how to weather with Noosh.
Oh, I think Mo was asking that earlier.
For like streaking and things of that nature. We'll be creating some dirt and rust streaks with Noosh.
Are you gonna sponge it? Says Voldemort.
I'll use some sponging, yeah. I'll use a lot of brush work too. Streaks, I use a brush. I'll use sponge for some things though. We'll be doing some sponge chips and weathering. You guys are in for a treat. Now you can start seeing how I really am going in and just kind of spotting this highlight color in between the various pieces and parts of the tank. And that randomness really gives it some life. Sets us up for the win when we start to do the streaking and...
Yeah. Oh, that light's gonna be fun too.
Yeah. Dang,
this I don't know if this is getting you guys jazzed to paint a tank, but now I'm like, I want to paint a tank. This is great. Welcome in, everybody. If you're just tuning in, we had some fun with our bust this last couple weeks, but we've switched it up. Whoa, hey, we loved our bust. Now we're painting a vehicle, doing some airbrush technique. This VOD will go live right after the stream today. Definitely check it out. Going to be clipping some portions of airbrush cleaning. I mean, paint a dreadnought. Dreadnought would be fun to paint in this scheme too.
Dreadnoughts are great for this. We've painted many a dreadnought with this.
I do like a classic dreadnought. Because I played those video games back in the day. But this would be a fun workup for that. Making them just military green.
100%. Oh, like the military green. Yeah, you can do this with any color is the nice thing.
I was just like, it'd be cool to have a green dreadnought or a green anything now. Voldemort. Yes, ASMR painting. It is the spritzes.
Looking good. Got to keep cleaning the tip of the brush though as you go. And I should show you how I'm doing this. I literally just have my wet paper towel from cleaning.
Yeah.
And I just get two fingers together. I put the paper towel over the needle, and then I just pull the paint off of the needle tip. You don't want to eject the needle to clean it while there's still paint in the cup. It'll pull all that paint backwards through the seals.
So you got to really make sure that tip is all cleaned up. Don't clip that one, Chad.
I blame Chris.
It's inevitable. What are we gonna do?
Oh, sorry, I was a little off.
No, you're good. Did you change the color of the flooring with the remodel so it's harder to lose the nozzle cap?
No.
Asking for a friend.
No.
Those little things, when they hit the ground, goodbye. For some reason, the ground's just like, yep, I'm going to eat this today.
Knock wood, we found it every time. Don't ask me how. We're lucky.
Everybody's loving the little sounds of the airbrush.
The real dudes.
It's actually probably now, that I got the mic right there. It's, you guys probably heard it before when he was airbrushing, but we've definitely turned up the volume since the last
Well, we've
setup.
called a lot of attention to it too, so.
Yeah. Mr. Blue, Airbrush Day. That's right. It's been a lot of good little techniques in here today.
Yeah, a lot of people asking about airbrushing with Pro Acryl on the regular, so being able
Yes.
to show you not only how we spray a particular technique, but also just how we use the paint and airbrush. Gives a lot of good info out there.
Gabe's like, oh, it's nice until I hear that dong, dong, dong of the compressor. Great stream until I hear the brah. Ooh, Voldemort asks, is airbrush cheating?
Never.
No.
Is it cheating to build a house with an air nailer, or am I supposed to use a hand hammer for the whole thing? Heck no. People that say that are just scared of airbrushing. They need to come in here and learn how to use an airbrush, and it's the most wonderful tool you'll have. Now, it is not at combat with a brush. You got to have skills with both.
Two different tools.
Yeah, the two different tools, right? So, no, there's no cheating involved.
That is a good question. Good question to differentiate. Like, there's two different applications for two different things, right? Wad, that's funny. If you don't build your house cutting down your own trees, are you even a man?
Yeah. That's what I always say to people when they're like, airbrushing is cheating.
Voldemort.
Like, you're just new to the hobby and are afraid of the airbrush. I can fix that for you.
Voldemort's asking, can you achieve the same results with an airbrush? Or, I'm sorry, with a brush?
That's a great question. Could you paint this tank and make it look beautiful with a brush? Yes. Would it be the same? No. The brush will not atomize the paint the way the airbrush will, so the overall look will be a tad different, right? Now, we have shown how to do kind of everything from using the smudge technique with our dome dry brushes works really well.
Yeah.
To paint a tank. And then, you have all sorts of techniques at your fingertips when using a regular brush. We'll be dry brushing and using a regular brush on this after the fact, too, to add more effects to it. So there'll be a lot of regular brushing going on. But for the base coats, I recommend airbrushing on vehicles like this. Because to do this with a regular brush is a lot of blending work, as you can imagine. Now, could you base coat and then start doing weathering techniques on top of it? Washes, oil washes, filtering, things like that? 100%. So you could base coat this in green, dry brush it in a brighter green, start using filters and things over it, and eventually get up to that. And that's the way a lot of military modelers will do it. And that can work great. They'll just do literally like a base coat and maybe one highlight, and then do it. But airbrush is definitely going to speed everything up and make you not go insane. That's the case.
That's the moral of the story.
That's the moral of the story.
It's
Chad.
more for your sanity than anything.
Airbrush will get you great consistent coverage on larger surfaces better than any other technique out there. Like I said, the dry brushing techniques work great. I recommend them. They will never surpass airbrush in ease and in smoothness of the finished product in the same amount of time. Like I said, we're done, I think.
That looks great.
We've got it. There you go.
I'm gonna zoom out a little for him. See the whole picture. Oh, nice. Look at that, chat. That's great. You can when you zoom out, you start to see more of the light direction too.
Yeah, you're talking about it already looking like it has streaking going on, right? So it already feels like we have a motion to the weathering that's being pulled down because I've got the darkness towards the bottom. I've got the panel lines that are dark. I've got the edges of the turret and the round body parts that are still dark. So it gives us that used feeling. There you go.
Nice.
That's airbrushing a tank. We're done. Ta-da. Now we're moving to brush stuff. Ta-da. So we'll clean the airbrush one more time. That was technically 4 because I primer based with black brown primer. So I just used our Monument Prime black brown and did the whole model in black brown. No special anything there, just spray the whole model. And then after that, going in with what we'll call a base of the dark camo green, but it's not a all coverage base, because remember, I let the black brown show through in the panels and in the low spots. I let the black brown become the shade and applied the dark green so that I was boxing it in, painting the side of the turret as if it were a single thing, the top of the turret as if it were like 9 things, because there's there's the cupola top, there's these little viewports and all of that, so I'm spotting color around so that the colors are being able to be seen at everything. I'm not just the black brown's the only thing that sprayed the whole surface. Everything else is being pulled into tighter and tighter and tighter little spots by the time I get to the highlight with the faded green plus camo green. Then because the camo green was the second coat, and then mix in the faded green with it, and I'm just pulling it into smaller and smaller spots for each of those colors, so they all exist here. You can see them all, but because I'm pulling it tighter and tighter and tighter in the direction of my lighting, now I have a highlight to it and the dirt and the weathered look.
Awesome.
And seriously, once you do this once or twice and start getting it, come back here, watch this video. Chris is going to take this, turn it into a video on its own. Once you watch that video a couple times, you'll feel good about doing this with any color combination you want for anything you want to spray, where it is that kind of mechanical, vehicle, whatever, where you're sectioning it off, spraying it from dark to light, leaving the panel lines dark, and getting that pre-weathering. It takes 90% of the work off your hands. You don't have to pin wash these. You don't have to do hardly anything. So...
Ari Man's Wrath, 55 months.
Hello, man. Good to see you.
Dude, I've had dating relationships that haven't lasted this long. BTW, I've got a gift for you, Monument Hobbies. What?
Armin's has been around a lot longer than 50 months. He pops in and out occasionally.
Wow.
But he's been here a long time.
Ghost Hunter, could you do this with hot pink?
No. Impossible. There are laws that we have to abide by, Ghost Hunter.
There are laws.
There are laws. Laws that keep society safe. And one of them says, do not do this using hot pink. It's not me writing the rules, so don't kill the messenger. Again, just making sure I don't have any buildup around the neck here.
Voldemort is asking, is there any specific paint products which you are not using with the airbrush?
Any paint products I won't use with an airbrush? Is that the question?
No, is there any specific paint products which you are not using with airbrush? Maybe you're asking like if it's not our line, but he's using our paint straight through the airbrush, if that's what you're asking, Voldemort.
Any of our products? Like, I wouldn't use our heavy paints.
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe that's what you mean.
If that's the question. I won't use heavy warm white or heavy titanium white through the airbrush. I would thin them down. You can use them through the airbrush. Just be careful. You need a lot of thinning because they start at a very high viscosity compared to the other colors. So, they will clog up a lot quicker. I mean, they might not even spray until you thin them down, to be honest with you.
Armor's Wrath. Well, I have a job that caused me to miss about 90% of your streams. I remember when you were Slow Fuse Gaming, you sold other people's paints and supplies.
Yep.
That's a long time ago.
Yep, back at Slow Fuse Gaming, we used to sell what is now competitive paint lines before there was anything other than, even before there was the Special White. And then when we made Special White and started making our own paints, we said farewell to the retailer store mentality and started making all our own stuff.
Oh, Atax Frost has a question. Do your primers rub off like Vallejo airbrush primers?
Our primers are a lighter polyurethane. They will rub off if you handle them. They will not rub off when painting over them unless you're doing if you prime and then do like a heavy dry brush right over the primer, you might knock it off. But yeah, they're not meant to be handled. They are not heavy duty poly because the more polyurethane I add into them, the more they cover up details, the thicker they become. So our paints are made to be thin, not obscure the details. They're super strong once you lock in with that first painted layer. Our primers are there to be what a primer is supposed to be, not a paint layer per se, but to be the tooth. They're ultra matte, so they give a good tooth for the next layer of paint to grab onto. And that's the whole thing. So, they rub off. Like, as I'm painting, you'll watch me rub paint off. But it's easy to, paint back over it. The goal is to make sure you have a large enough surface for your paint to grab.
Smelly fella.
Well, probably not, because we covered him up. People were asking. We finished
yeah.
Antonio L. Tigre.
Right.
We pretty much finished up. I have to finish the brown leather on the hilt, but we got the first base on, and I didn't want to spend time today worried about that little part. Oh, and we got to paint that damn gold chain. With that gold chain. Yeah, so while I was painting this model, right, and it's a display model, I was rubbing paint off like nobody's business down here off of edges. It still was, I used the dark gray primer, dark neutral gray, and I was rubbing off of the edges because I held it with my thumb right there, so that would rub off. Now, if I rub on it, it will, but, it won't rub off now with the paint on there. So.
Oh, here's a question from going back to Smelly Fella right here. A few days ago, Jason mentioned other brands that were on the same level as Pro Acryl. He mentioned Scale 75 and another that I can't remember. Is Andrea on the same level? I invested a lot in Andrea acrylics before I found you guys, but I will be replacing them with Pro Acryl as my stock of Andrea is used up. I did buy all of the Pro Synthetics and Sables last week, though.
So I'm going to get snarky here. I didn't say anybody was on the same level. I said there are other brands that make paint in a way that is attributable to like fine art paint, where they use better pigmentation. The Scale Artist line in the tube, not the regular liquid paints, but the Artist line in the tube, the Chimera colors. Andrea's great colors. They're very hard to get, but they're great. They're made like fine art paints. So yeah, I don't find them to be as easy to work with. I used them years and years and years. They've been around for a long time. But yeah, good paints.
Jason, it is almost 4:00.
No, it isn't.
Yeah, dude.
What? I'm all excited to dry brush.
We might have to make him wait.
You know how Chris is the bearer of horrible news every
chat.
Single day.
I'm sorry, chat.
We were just about to get to the good part.
Oh, chat, I'm so sorry.
Right? I mean, I've been boring you with all this airbrushing, and now we're about to get to the part that brings a tank alive. And Chris
hey,
is the frenemy.
The frenemy?
The enemy of fun.
Hey, you know what?
Enemy of fun.
Someone has to play the villain. I'll play the part.
James says, you're the boss. Make it work longer. I can't do that.
After all, what is a drama without a villain?
I mean, he was off goofing off this morning, so I could make it work longer.
I was.
Chris is cracking. He does crack the whip. He's like, it's almost 4. We have to go. Stop having fun.
No.
Children?
We run a tight ship here.
Children?
Come back tomorrow. Do.
Tim says you're going to be in New York City tomorrow. What? Zoom in a little bit, Chris.
Yes, sir.
Crack that whip. Zoom that camera.
That's it. That's ultra zoomed.
So today what we have done is taken you from a base layer of black-brown primer up to this level of finish, which is already showing quite a bit of weathered look without doing any weathering at all. All we're doing is airbrushing layer after layer, and we get a nice beaten looking paint that will only start to come more alive once we do all of the other effects. Now, you can see very quickly that depending on how detailed you're looking to make your army, you could do this that we just did in 2 hours of stream time is basically like 45 minutes of real world time. So in 45 minutes, you paint a tank. And you could do a whole platoon of tanks very quickly like this, get to the stages we're going to show you tomorrow, which is the dry brushing stage, and then paint the gas tank, the gas can red, some metallic on there, maybe paint the light on the front, put some decals on it, and literally be done, right? Paint the hoses black, pick out the details on it if you wanted to, but you can see how by just putting some basing terrain on this, then all of a sudden this is looking like a damn near complete model. We'll push it further so that I can show you the way you can take this very basic start and make it, this could turn into a display model. So nothing I've done here is fast and speed paint way of painting to say that, if you're going to paint this way, this is great. This is the way I would paint every vehicle I do, whether I were entering it into a world famous painting competition or just trying to get models on the table quick, because it's so good at delivering such a good, I say clean, a good dirty weathered look onto models that you can't beat it. Right? There's no other way that I could put up against this. As long as you have an airbrush and you're comfortable using an airbrush, there's no other method I could show you that gives you such a good coloring as quick as this.
Zoom back out. Nice.
So thank you, everybody. As usual, now we're being kicked out.
No,
Chris, the enemy of fun, has said no more.
Goodness.
So I am I'm bound by contract to listen to Chris. Chad, I will have you know that I would stay with you for the rest of the night.
Oh my!
But I am not allowed by my handlers to do so. And do you know that they put brown M&Ms in the green room?
Oh no, the green room. I'm sorry, Chad. What have I done?
R.I.P. fun, Gosu.
R.I.P. fun.
R.I.P. fun. Shakes cane in anger at Chris. Old man yells at clouds. Ragnar, what's going on? But thank you. 5,336 amazing artists in the Discord who hung out with Christmas Sushi's motto while listening to Jason explain how to give an airbrush a kink. Give an airbrush a... What? Wait, that got out of hand quick. We were going so well. Tony the Tigre, smelly fella. Yes. A little bit of detailing work that we need to be doing, but yes. Yeah, ta-da.
We posted up the black armor workup on that today. The next thing on that guy will be the...
We didn't even mention that. The
gold.
black armor video is up on YouTube today, so
Yep.
go subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're watching over on YouTube, you'll see it on there. But Chris did a hell of an edit to getting this down to, what is it, 34 minutes?
35.
35 minutes to show you how to paint black armor like this. So it's a great little snippet. Well worth the watch. Love it. Chris is doing the Lord's work.
Trying.
Getting all of this craziness that we spew out at you on stream into bite-sized chunks so you don't have to listen to the fart jokes and all the in-between nonsense. But thank you so much for joining us. Love having you here. If you're new around, please hit the follow button or the subscribe button if you're over on YouTube. We stream Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time here at Phoenix HQ, Arizona. Monument Hobbies. Check out the links that Chris, the fart jokes are the best. Check out all the links that Chris put up in chat. Check out the monumenthobbies.com site where you can buy all of our wonderful Pro Acryl and Pro Series brush products, the things you see us use on the stream today, including the airbrush. And then check out the FLGS link where you can find all those same products at a local store closer to you or in the country you live in and save yourself on shipping. Support a business that helps grow the hobby for your local community. Also check out our YouTube if you're not over there already, where all of these go into the live tab once we're done, so you can catch up on parts you missed or go back and watch them again later. And then last but not least, join the Discord, where, as we learned, there are over 5,300 and some odd artists that are sharing amazing inspirational works on the daily, as well as lamenting about how cold it is where they live, telling horrible jokes, showing off their food and their pets. It's a great place to make new friends and enjoy the hobby 24 hours a day, so we'd love to see you over there. Join us. Thank you so much. Stick around. Chris is going to find somebody to raid if he still has an ounce of fun left in him.
Oh my, there it is.
I don't know if it's there, though, but if it is, and he actually does it, then show some love in the channel we wind up in, and we'll catch you back here tomorrow, gang. Adios.